Yes, the notorious serial killer Ed Gein inspired movies like Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as well as the character of Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Yes, Ed Gein murdered people, skinned them, and made furniture from that skin, likely inspired by Nazi war criminals. Yes, Ed Gein was diagnosed with schizophrenia and spent his final days in a psychiatric institution before dying of cancer. After that, the facts start getting a lot fuzzier in Ryan Murphy's new joint, Monster, the Ed Gein Story. After getting heat from viewers about Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story, and Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez Story, you'd think Murphy would have maybe taken the note that people don't really like it when you throw in both fact and fiction and melt it down into the form of a biographical TV series. Much like his previous shows, the Ed Gein Story is half truth and half fantastical lies. The series turns the serial killer from a man who was very much a ruthless serial killer who did not see people as human beings into a soft-spoken, dopey, small-town boy who just didn't know any better and was more a victim of his mother and mental illness than a cold-blooded killer.
Ryan Murphy's Monster, the Ed Gein Story once again glorifies a serial killer.
The Ed Gein that we meet in Ryan Murphy's show is the last person you'd think would be a serial killer. Played by Charlie Hunnam, Murphy's Gein is a quiet and repressed farm boy. He was raised by his abusive and zealously religious mother, Augusta, in a small town in Wisconsin. Most people in town find him to be a little weird, but I'll say he wouldn't hurt a fly. It's the kind of lazy irony that will make you eye-roll the first time you hear it and make you turn off your TV after the 10th time. For the first half of the Ed Gein story, its lead mercilessly butchers people, robs graves to defile bodies, murders people and makes suits out of their skin, and even commits necrophilia. And while there is menace in these scenes, and directors Max Winkler and Ian Brennan depict the horror on point, this is always blunted by the dogged attempt to make viewers empathize with Ed. Throughout the series, there are direct parallels of Ed's crimes to scenes from Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which both stutter the pacing of the series and feel out of place. Both Alfred Hitchcock and Tobe Hooper become fascinated with this story, and we're clearly meant to wonder, are Hitchcock and Hooper so different from Ed Gein? The answer is, of course, yes. Hitchcock may have had his issues in particular, but he was certainly not skinning people to make leggings. The series also seems to delight in the grotesque. Rather than portraying it as the horror that it is, Murphy likens his murders to a movie, inherently instilling it with an aura of fiction. The intention is clear. If I like Psycho or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, am I empathizing with a killer? Perhaps the bigger question is Ed Gein completely irredeemable? The attempt to point the finger at the viewer is so thinly veiled, I question if a veil is even there. And while there is an argument to be made about the exploitative nature of the true crime genre, Ryan Murphy is not the one to make it. By the end of the story, we're meant to feel bad for a crying Gein as he says, "I just feel like I'm a puzzle and none of the pieces fit. I have a feeling they ain't ever gonna fit." Indeed, the series never fails to try and paint Ed Gein in a more pleasing light, turning him from the real-life Buffalo Bill into a brooding anti-hero who redeems himself by helping the FBI capture Ted Bundy. None of which is true, by the way, in case you fell for Murphy's trap on that one.
Monster, the Ed Gein Story, is the worst of the true crime genre.
Ryan Murphy has never been a subtle creator. Oftentimes, that's a good thing. His bombastic and over-the-top shows bring controversy, get people talking, and create memorable characters that we never forget. However, with the Ed Gein Story, he leans completely into titillation. Breasts are flying around everywhere, women are screaming with their beautiful blonde hair tossed around, and if you play a drinking game about how many times you see Charlie Hunnam's muscled body scantily clad in a matching bra and panties set, you'll be drunk before you make it through the midpoint. And through all of this, as Murphy cuts in scenes from Psycho or The Silence of the Lambs, or when we meet other serial killers, there's a sort of finger-wagging going on. At one point, Ed stares into the camera as he's committing his atrocities and simply says, "You're the one who can't look away." And it's clear that Murphy thinks this is a gotcha moment. Yes, many people have a fascination with true crime, but Murphy is missing the entire point of why, instead shaming viewers for their interest as if it's a dirty little secret.
There are definitely people who fantasize about serial killers in an unhealthy way, but the majority of this industry caters to a very specific audience. Women, who are, in many instances, the victims of these crimes, are interested in the stories not because of some depravity or sick fascination with the macabre. We are able to empathize with the innocents who become the fascination and victims of some very sick people. They serve as warnings to us, to remind us to lock our doors, check the back of our car, and not be too friendly with strangers lest you get thrown into the back of a van and left down in a well putting lotion on your skin. We are not empathizing with the killer. We are not fantasizing about their love life, and we are definitely not embracing another story that spends more time deifying a serial killer than even mentioning his victims. The show attempts to write off all of Gein's acts by giving us a schizophrenia diagnosis, which is what the real Ed Gein was diagnosed with, but never once mentions that schizophrenia is not a violent illness. Not everyone who has it will become an Ed Gein or a David Berkowitz. So often while watching this series, it feels like Ryan Murphy wrote this story 10 years ago and never updated it. It's 2025. Simply slapping a mental illness on a renowned serial killer and trying to write him off as some kind of troubled but well-meaning figure is not going to cut it.
The Ed Gein story's most egregious crime is its treatment of women.
One of the most egregious flaws of the Ed Gein story is how it portrays women. Of course, with no women writing or directing, that's hardly a surprise. The majority of women in the show fall into the category of either Madonna or whore. If a woman isn't nagging Ed or screaming at him, then they're trying to seduce him. In the beginning, Ed is dreamily in love with a girl named Adeline Watkins, who has a secret fascination with the macabre that she can only really share with Ed. Seems like a match made in heaven, right? Adeline's mother hates Ed's family, and Ed's mother hates basically all women. This is the most glaring of issues with the series, as it attempts to turn Ed and Adeline's relationship into some kind of twisted love story between two outcasts. We're meant to believe that Adeline is just as dark as Ed. After finding out about Ed's hobby of skinning people and making them into chairs, she sighs and flops down beside him and says, "I don't know why people get so persnickety about death." Really? You just found a nipple sewn into a chair and a rotting corpse in the other room, and that's the response? Adeline is the embodiment of a manic pixie dream girl. She's beautiful, flirtatious, and a bit aloof. She's a bit of a tease, and the show has no problem slut-shaming her for it. At one point, Adeline does a complete 180 and turns into an extremely unlikable character. Ed is positioned as a victim of her manipulations, and she even goes so far as to be the one who suggests Ed sexually defile a dead body since she'll be leaving town. She's quirky, weird, and not like the other girls, and when Ed is arrested, she eagerly steps into the limelight and accepts her 15 minutes of fame. On the flip side are Augusta, Ed's mom, and all the other older women whom Ed meets who become some version of a mother figure to him. The worst has to be the imagined version of Ilse Koch, the infamous wife of a Nazi commander who made lamps out of the skin of Jews who were murdered at Buchenwald. Ilse's presence in the series is one of its most nefarious additions. There is evidence that the real Gein was fascinated with pulp stories involving cannibals and Nazi war crimes. However, the degree to which this fictional Ed idolizes Ilse also in turn means that some of the blame for his crimes is placed on her shoulders. At one point, someone even suggests maybe if Ed Gein had never seen the horrors of Buchenwald, he might have never become a killer. We are never meant to empathize with any of the female characters like we do with Ed. They are caricatures for us to dislike, who will eventually die or betray him. At no point is responsibility for Ed Gein's actions put on Ed Gein. If the show isn't finding fault with the Nazis or his mom or Adeline, then it's blaming his mental illness.
The Ed Gein story's biggest problems completely overshadow anything good. The issue with this series is that, cinematically, it's still entertaining, with some visually arresting and beautiful scenes. Maybe if this were all a season of American Horror Story, it wouldn't be quite so unbearable. But the reality is that this is a half-baked story full of lies, with just enough truth to be called a biography. Ed Gein is a real person. He isn't Leatherface or Buffalo Bill or Norman Bates. And more importantly, the people he brutally killed without a second thought are real victims with real families, some of whom are still living today. It's unfortunate that Ed Gein wasn't diagnosed with schizophrenia sooner, but what's more unfortunate is the fact that his victims were so brutally dismembered and cut up that the morgue couldn't even piece them back together. Monster, the Ed Gein story, is as pulpy and sloppy as the comics that Ed reads, a product of sensationalism, rage bait, and misinformation. At one point, a nurse tells a dying Ed Gein that he should write his story, because everyone else has profited off of his story, so why shouldn't he? And it feels like we're meant to give Murphy a pat on the back, as if to say, "Good job, you've told the true version." The show ends with Ed ascending into the bright and beautiful afterlife, where his mother greets him warmly and puts a hand on his face before saying, "You really made a name for us, Geins, and I couldn't be more proud." And no, it's not ironic, it's meant to be genuine. The last scene depicts Ed enjoying a peaceful afterlife where he and his mom sit on their porch during a sunny afternoon. How many people will walk away from this show believing Ed Gein helped the FBI catch Ted Bundy? How many will defend his actions by claiming he didn't know better or that his mother was ultimately to blame? If there's even one, then Ryan Murphy has failed. But maybe, in his book, he's succeeded.